Today we're here with broker, the agency Texas, Justin Sheppard. For today's video, it'll be interview style. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about real estate and your experience as a broker.
Perfect.
Okay. So how are your conversations with buyers and sellers different right now compared to a year ago?
Sure. So really interest rates started to go up in June of 22. So prior to that, we were in COVID era, what we call COVID era conditions, which is basically, sellers commanding really high prices, multiple offers, buyers not having a lot of choices, having to put all of their capital towards the purchase. And obviously that's changed drastically in the last, 18 months or so. So interest rates went from, in the 3s and 4s to, as of today, it's October 4th, interest rates are creeping up into 8% and even higher, right? So that's a really pretty short period of time to have such a drastic change in the real estate market. So the conversations obviously are going to have to change with the buyers and sellers as well. So with buyers, it is, what you could afford a year and a half ago is not going to be what you can afford today.
Right.
With sellers, generally speaking, they're still anchored to the idea that they can get a really high price. Now that's certainly not everybody, but it's most sellers, and in any market they want to get the highest price possible. Right. So it's having that discussion and really showing them the data and saying, hey, look, here's what, well, first of all, tell me a little bit about your expectation, right? Feel them out that way, and then present them with the data and say, hey, listen, if you are looking to get this price in this market, it's going to be very challenging, right? We went from, prior to June of 22, basically one day on the market in the Austin area, right? You were getting multiple offers. So, maybe it was 3 days, but the first 3 days were really negotiating offers you got on the first day.
Right.
Now we're seeing 60 to 90 days, much longer time frames for sales. Buyers have more options. Buyers are taking their time, so they're not commanding as high of a price.
Sure.
So presenting them that data and trying to move away from the idea that we're going to be able to sell a house in 30 seconds or 1 day or 1 week, unless it's priced very aggressively, right? And typically there's a outcome that sellers are looking for, whether it's taking the profits from the home or reinvesting and buying another home or what have you, and that obviously changes that calculus tremendously because they're not going to be able to get what their ideal price is, right? Certainly that's what, as agents, that's what we want to do. We market the home and negotiate and try to get them a good price. It's just very challenging now. So for buyers, right, you're taking someone who's even, again, anchored to the idea that, interest rates are going to be lower. Interest rates have doubled, right? If you're in the 4s and now in the 8s, those $3,500 a month payments are now $4,500, or $2,500 are now $3,500, and that changes a lot of the DTI. And so if you come to someone and say, yeah, you could afford this product, 18 months ago, that's not the case now. Sellers who have locked into low interest rates, are having trouble wrapping their minds around and reconciling with the fact, like, hey, if I sell this house, a $500,000 house, and I want to move into a $750,000 or even a $350,000, move into a $500,000 house, the payment jumps up dramatically, right? And you're giving up an interest rate that may never come back.
Right.
And so it's put a strain on inventory because those sellers are saying, hey, well, we're going to sit around and wait. So there's not a lot of new inventory coming on the market. Sellers who are listing do want to get the most money they can.
Right.
Buyers want to get properties that are inexpensive, and that's not really the equation that we have now. Right? Austin's still pretty expensive. Prices haven't come down that much because there's not a lot of inventory, and then buyers are having trouble reconciling with their monthly payments because they've gone up tremendously of what they're used to seeing. Right? We're as of today, mortgage applications are at the 20-year low, and we haven't seen, or 23, haven't seen this few mortgage applications since 2000, and then we haven't seen interest rates this high since 2007. So there's a long run of years with low interest rates, and so changing that mentality is very challenging, right? Is what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. What we're looking at more so right now, and what we deal with as agents, is affordability. So, can I get you into a house that fits your budget with the interest rate? Hoping at some point they may come down, we may get to refinance and lower that payment, but that's in the future, right? And there are people who need housing today, so we have to find solutions today.
Yeah. But
yeah, those are the conversations. It's a very challenging market, and probably the most challenging market I've been in since 2010. On coaching people and guiding people and making them feel confident about the decisions, because there's a lot of information. The news cycle is very negative. Austin's still a great place to live, and there's still places that are more affordable than they were during the COVID time period, certainly. But there are a lot of other things that go into that equation, and making sure that affordability is, that the buyers feel comfortable with the payment and sellers feel comfortable selling and they have a place to go.
Right.
And that's really how the conversations change.
Are there misconceptions that you're hearing right now with new clients that you're taking on?
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that I think everyone thought that this was going to be a lot shorter lived. In the fact that I think most people thought, in the way the federal government kind of spoke about it, was, what's driving the interest rates is inflation, and when inflation continues to go up or stubbornly doesn't go down, the Federal Reserve keeps raising interest rates, which have an effect on mortgage rates, right? And when they spoke to it through the terms of it being transitory, which means that it was going to be short-lived. And now we're thinking, okay, this may be a lot longer of a time period than we had anticipated. Right. So you remember we used to talk about, date the rate, marry the house. Right. Well, now it's more of maybe you have to marry both, because it could be a longer time period. So that is a misconception. Like, well, interest rates are going to go down at some point. Yes, they may, but it may be a longer time period, and that's a harder discussion. So again, it goes back to affordability. If you can afford the house you're purchasing in it with an 8% rate, then assume that that's going to be 8% for the life of the loan. And then if they do go down, great, that's a cherry on top. The other half of that, the misconception, is sellers are fire selling homes. Now, there certainly is a segment of the seller population that you're going to see dramatic price decreases. Right? They may have started a little bit high, thinking they were going to get a price that they couldn't get, and they're reducing based on the number of showings. As you know, if you've had listings, right? We've had listings that have very few showings. You have to make adjustments pretty quick. You can't just sit around and wait for a buyer, right? So that's another misconception, is there's just a lot of fire sales. And we know in Austin, still a very desirable place to live. Tesla's, the big companies, Tesla to name one, they're still hiring. Hiring certain slowed across the board, but there are some companies still hiring, which means that some of the markets are still very healthy. We have seen the prices, they're not going nearly as high as they were COVID period, but sellers aren't dumping. We're not seeing inventory come in the market at these smoking prices where everyone's jumping on it and saying, right, I gotta have that, right? The South Austin prices in 77, 4.5 and 4.8, they were creeping up from 500 to 600,000, which is a big price jump for that area. Even higher, now have settled into the fives, and you can get some stuff even lower. But even that's moving a little bit slower, right? Because again, it goes back to affordability, because the rate, right? Your rate's higher, you're going to pay more for that home, right? Borrowing costs are higher, lending standards are tighter, and I think overall Americans are feeling the squeeze on disposable income. Yeah. Right? Credit card debt's at an all-time high. Savings are much lower than they were during COVID period. I wouldn't say all-time low, but that don't want to just be hyperbolic when I'm talking about it. But there are some facts, right? Right. Most people can't afford to take on $1,000 or higher more mortgage payment. So, yeah, that's the misconception. The misconception is that buyers think that they can get a really, really good price. Sellers think they can get a really high price, and so there's a lot of mixed messaging there, and we're not really seeing eye to eye.
Comes to expectations, you said, as the agent.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.